Hello and welcome to Tim Conley Drums. Today we are going to discuss a very sensitive topic, which is the topic of musician stereotypes. So I've come up with a list of 8 standard musician stereotypes, and we are going to discuss each one of them. Let's get to it. In compiling my list of stereotypes, I came up with what I think are standard stereotypes that I have gotten over the years. I've heard from people, I've witnessed. Now, the interesting thing about stereotypes is they have to come from somewhere. You know, they don't just miraculously appear. Obviously, the stereotypes come from a belief that the pattern of behavior that people do involved in the stereotype, whatever it is common and across the board for all of them. So, you know, you're a hockey player. There's stereotypes for being a hockey player. All hockey players do this, this, and this. So there is some truth in stereotypes. I'm not going to sit here. I'm going to give you 8 stereotypes, but I'm not going to sit here and say that these stereotypes were just made up. They had to come from somewhere, like I said. So there is some truth in stereotypes, but not always. So let's get to my list. Number 1, musicians are stupid. Absolutely not true. Just every single one of my 8 stereotypes that I'm listing today can affect everybody, meaning that no matter what job you're in, unless it's, neuroscientist, nobody's going to say a neuroscientist is stupid or a rocket scientist is stupid or whatever, generally speaking. But stupidity can be in any hobby, line of work, career, profession, any job. You're going to have smart people, you're going to have stupid people. So it happens in everywhere, you know. Now, in music, as musicians not being smart enough to do anything else, so they turn to music because they're not smart, is totally wrong. To be a musician, you have to be incredibly smart because you have to figure out all the things that you want your hands and feet, if you're a drummer, to do. And it's also been scientifically proven that drummers are the smartest among musicians. Now, the thing is that I read the research and the studies and stuff, and it's very interesting. So I encourage you to look up why drummers are the smartest people. You look it up and you can check it out for yourself. So that myth, in my opinion, or that stereotype rather is debunked. Most musicians that I've dealt with are pretty smart people. So I disagree with that one. Number 2, they're partiers. Okay, now this one can be true. I've been in bands with guys that partied like crazy, drunk on stage, before the gig drunk, after the gig drunk, smoking dope, shooting heroin. I mean, I've seen it all. Now, that again, I'm not going to debunk this as a false stereotype because it is in a lot of ways a true stereotype if you look at rock stars. And a lot of rock stars are the reason why people have this stereotype because of Ozzy, Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses, Aerosmith. They're all junkies, they're all addicts, whatever. Now, like I said in my very beginning of this video, this can apply in all aspects of life amongst all of us. It's certainly not just musicians and in general that are partiers. It's everywhere. But because of, Keith Moon throwing the TV out of the hotel window and Motley Crue trashing hotel rooms and whatnot, there's this stereotype that's developed that all musicians are partiers. Well, I can tell you right now, Rush, for example, they were not partiers at all. Neil, Geddy, and Alex, after they finished their show and they were in the green room, if they had to stay at a venue, they just went to their hotel room, drank tea, and relaxed. I mean, I'm sure that there was some partying that took place, but I've never heard of a story of Rush trashing a hotel room or anything like that. So, I mean, Rush is an exception because I've been in situations on tour where crazy stuff happened. I witnessed it. You know, I actually saw it in person. But I'm going to say, though, a lot of the bands that I play in, especially when you get older, all of that goes away. Yeah, you're 20 years old, you're on the road for the first time and you're going crazy. But now you're 60 years old, you've been doing that for 40 years. Maybe it's time to just do the show, and then after the show, you just meet the fans, maybe you shake some hands, you sign some autographs, and then you just relax. And I think that's what happens. I think the partying is when you're young, but when you're an older musician, you start to calm down and you're not interested in partying. You just need to recover from that show so you can do another show. Old age. Okay, another one. Musicians have a lack of drive or goals. Well, this is another one I totally disagree with. Some of the most driven people that I've ever met have been musicians. And I know myself, extremely driven. I went through incredibly hard times where I was ready to give up, but I never actually did. There were times, you know, you get fired from a band and you're devastated and you think, why am I even bothering to do this? And that's the approach a lot of people take, and then they quit. I never did that. A lot of musicians that I know went through hardship. Every musician I know went through hardship. But again, not giving up is the key. Now, the lack of drive or goals comes from this idea that they just want to play their instrument all day and not do anything else. Now, in some cases, that's true. There's that song, I just want to bang on my drum all day. I don't want to work. Now, if you're a professional, you are working. Banging on the drum is work. But for 99% of the population, music is a hobby. So you can still work, pursue all your goals in life, whether they be financial goals or career goals or, you know, family goals, whatever your goals are, and you can still be a musician. You could even be a gigging musician. You know, my hat goes off to all the weekend warriors out there that just play on Friday and Saturday. You know, those guys, there's probably more of them than there is guys like me that are working this as an actual career. The weekend warrior, they don't lack drive or goals. As a matter of fact, they're extremely driven. They're driven also to have fun, because musicians do enjoy having fun. That's not on my list, but it is true. Playing music, being in a band, being on stage, entertaining people, doing all that stuff, it's a lot of fun. And it's an enjoyable thing. So I don't think musicians lack drive or goals. On the contrary. Okay, another one. Can't hold a job. Well, if your job is, like I just said, if your job is being a full-time professional musician, I hold down a number of jobs. I teach at a music school. I run my own business, which is my music school. I do YouTube. Technically, I get paid to do YouTube because I'm monetized. So that's a job. I also have merch. So I run a business of selling Tim Conley Drums merch through YouTube. I also work for different studios as a studio musician. Not a lot, that's really died off, but I do that, and I have done that frequently in the past. Of course, I play in bands, and they're all jobs. They're all these things are jobs. I'm doing an adjudication for a music school coming up where there's going to be about 15 or 16 drummers performing, and I have to adjudicate the performances. So that's a job. I got to show up there on time. I've got to be dressed properly. I've got to smell good. I can't be, you know, smelling of alcohol. I can't be high, none of that stuff. You have to be responsible. So this whole idea that musicians can't hold down jobs, I totally disagree with that. I hold down 6 or 7 jobs inside of my main job as a musician. Now, what a lot of musicians do, and I did this when I was much younger, they hold down a job, you know, at a restaurant. busing, waitering, bartender, they get a factory job, whatever. And then they do the music on the side. Or they do music as a full-time thing, but then they have a side job to help them to get through and pay the bills. That is a very real thing. So I believe most musicians, on the contrary, they can hold down a job. Okay, another one, have addictive or harmful personalities. Again, that's broad across all spectrums. Doctors sometimes develop addictions by taking their own products that they subscribe to people. It's not something exclusive to musicians. Again, though, it is a stereotype because so many famous musicians, Miles Davis, Rick James, the lead singer from Steven Tyler from Aerosmith, the list goes on and on and on of very famous musicians that were also famous junkies. And a lot of them died from their abuse and use of alcohol and drugs. Amy Winehouse always comes to mind when it comes to alcohol, how she drank herself to death, So that part of stereotypes does have a lot of truth to it, but it doesn't mean all of us have addictive or harmful personalities. A lot of musicians that I know and I've worked with, they're not harmful people. They're very loving people. They're very warm people and giving people. A lot of musicians, they really want to get their music out and they want to spread joy and love and happiness or some kind of emotion through their music. So harmful personalities, yes, some very harmful. Kurt Cobain comes to mind when it comes to harmful to himself. I think he was very, very hard on himself. And of course, he committed suicide. So, that's the ultimate in harming yourself. So there is some truth in the addiction and harmful personalities. But again, it's a stereotype. It's not across the board. I personally don't have any addictions. I found out, though, I'm addicted to sugar. And that's why I'm on a diet. And I haven't had any carbohydrates other than fruit and vegetables. I've had no starch carbohydrates, which would be rice, potatoes, any kind of a white flour like bread or anything like that. I've had no bread, no pasta, no starch at all. And I've had no sugar for a week today. And I'm a little antsy. I have to admit, it's very, very difficult. But I'm trying to break my sugar and carbohydrate addiction by eating a higher fat, higher protein, fruits and vegetables diet. And it's a diet, but I'm hoping to make it part of a lifestyle because I eat way too much sugar, and not having sugar for the last week has been very difficult. I'm not going to lie, but I've lost, I think, 5 pounds. So I'm trying to get down to 200 pounds from 223 to 200. That's my goal. Okay, now the other stereotype that I think is old school is that we're all hippies. Well, some of us are. What's wrong with being a hippie? They're loving, wonderful people in a lot of ways. The only thing about hippies that I certainly am not is the stereotype that hippies are not interested in work. It's all love and peace, smoke dope all day and do nothing. Well, I don't think so. You can be a hippie personality, which is a loving person and kind to people and not have a care in the world, but still hold down a job, still work as a musician. Look at the amount of musicians from all the way through in history of music that were hippie type personalities. Of course, the hippie became very popular in the 60s, the Summer of Love, which was in 1967 in California. That was probably the most the most famous summer for hippies in the history of being a hippie. But modern day hippies, they're just normal people. They're just different than the white shirt, white collar, 9 to 5 kind of a guy, So we're not all hippies, that's for sure. I'm certainly not a hippie. But there's lots of musicians that are hippies, and so what? That's okay. Um, Next one, number 7. Sorry, I haven't been counting. I've just been spouting them out here, but they're moody and difficult and withdrawn. Now, like I said, these things affect, you can be moody, difficult, and withdrawn and be a lawyer. Generally speaking, musicians can be moody, difficult, and withdrawn, but they can also be very engaging, loving, and warm and not withdrawn, extroverts. There's always going to be an extrovert and an introvert. Now, I can't remember the name of the guy, but the second half of Wham, the guy that played guitar with George Michael, he was an introvert. He didn't really like the fame. He didn't really want to be out on the stage and, front and center the way George did. George was an extrovert. He wanted the fame. He wanted all the glory that comes with being a front and center. It's kind of a singer. And I think that it depends on the person. And I think that in a lot of cases, people are affected by what goes on around them. There's the society and the things that happen to them. And, we're human beings. We're going to be moody. We're going to be difficult. We're going to be withdrawn. We all have ups and downs. It's a normal part of human behavior, certainly not exclusive to music by any means. So I think that that stereotype does have some truth to it. But here's another thing I want to point out, and this has actually happened to me, where something happens to you. Let's say you got a gig at 6 o'clock that night. Something terrible happens to you during the day. Now, you can sit at home and cry and whine about what happens to you, or you can put it aside temporarily, get out on stage, and sort of forget about it. Now, it's acting in some ways, and this is what creates the trap of getting into alcohol and drugs. When musicians are mentally going through so many difficult times and the stress of performing, and their wife just left them, or their girlfriend just told them that they were with somebody else, or whatever the news is, a lot of musicians will still perform, but they have to go through the fakery of getting up on stage. And I think that the turning point, Jane's Addiction, for example, that singer was going through so many issues, and then it just exploded on stage. Most of us get on stage and we use the music and the time on stage as a moment to forget about all our troubles. I know for myself, when I've been on stage and I'm worried about something in my life, or something's happened to me, that day or the day before or whatever, when I'm on stage performing, I'm not thinking about that. I'm just thinking about the crowd. I'm thinking about the band. I'm thinking about the songs, the performance, and I'm in my happy place. Now, once you get off stage, you might go back to that process of having to think about things all over again. And it is a difficult process. And a lot of musicians, they turn to the bottle and to the needle to try to process that. I've seen that so much. It's ridiculous. But like I said, I stay away from that. All right, the last one, number 8, mental problems. A lot of musicians have mental problems. Well, yes, a lot of musicians do have mental problems, but so do a lot of people in general, as I've said many, many times throughout this whole thing. The stereotype that musicians have mental problems, it is legit. I mean, a lot of them have mental problems and they turn to the alcohol and the drugs to try and help themselves. Some of them commit suicide. Some of them do crazy things like killing their, committing murder or committing a crime or whatever. I mean, in the end, we're all human beings. But music has an incredible way of calming. And like I just said, you forget about your problems when you're playing your guitar, playing your bass, that keyboard, those drums, singing, whatever. Music is so incredibly good at allowing you to escape. I used to play in a band with a guy that told me he really enjoyed dressing up and escaping his real self by wearing costumes on stage, which is why he enjoyed being in tribute bands where he would dress up like the person that he was doing a tribute to. And he really enjoyed that. And he told me it was escapism. Now, this guy didn't drink or do drugs either. His escapism was to get on stage, sing, play piano, guitar, be somebody else for 2 or 3 hours on stage and forget about all his problems. Now, that to me is a healthier way to deal with mental issues. Now, on the negative side of that, I've been in a few tribute bands where the guys who were, Frank Sinatra or Stevie Ray Vaughan, for example, they took it too far, and they started to adopt the personality. A lot of Elvis impersonators do this. They think they're Elvis. And obviously you're not somebody else. Yes, you can escape into the world of Elvis or, James Brown or whatever when you're on stage. But once you're off stage, you got to go back to being yourself. It's just a character that you're playing. You're basically an actor when you're in a tribute band, So I hope that by doing this video today that I cleared up what some people definitely deem as being pure stereotypes for musicians. And like I said, when you go through the 8, they apply to everybody. But these 8 are very, very significant in musicians' lives. And some are true, some aren't. Let me know what you guys think about what I said today about musician stereotypes. I'm very interested to hear. I appreciate all the comments, and I try and respond and get back to everybody that comments on my channel. So thanks very much for joining me today. And as always, keep drumming. See ya.